I'm honored to join you, and thank you, Judy, for the very kind words. I didn't know what Judy's introduction was going to be, so just a little bit out of school because it's so much fun. How many of you have gone down to Springfield to lobby and gone by the Dixie truck stop? Those of us who are all driving down periodically, from the league, the environmental groups, and so forth, we would tend to stop off at the Dixie to get some food. Somebody ordered at the Dixie a Reuben sandwich. It led to the infamous line in the environmental movement in Illinois, "Never order deli at the Dixie." We learned. And don't give up on democracy, okay? So let's talk about not giving up on democracy, playing to win, protecting our environment, and making the planet a better place today and tomorrow. The League of Women Voters has worked for years to protect, restore, to keep clean water and safe water. And when it comes to our country, and you talk to people, there is no partisan debate. When it comes to protecting and restoring and saving and making better our rivers, our lakes, our streams, our oceans, and that doesn't matter whether you're here in the Midwest or in the Rockies or on the East Coast or the West Coast. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. It doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man, young, old, urban, rural, suburban, African American, Asian American, Latino, white, doesn't matter. The polling data is all the same when it comes to safe, clean drinking water. Okay, and you're going to hear that phrase from me a couple of times. Safe, clean drinking water. Because what we say about water matters. And when it comes to safe, clean water or safe, clean drinking water, everybody is with us. There is truly no group of people, based on extensive polling and focus group data, that says, nah, I don't like that safe, clean water. No, I prefer dirty water. No, I like unsafe water. I don't like water. I prefer Coke. I don't know. When it comes to that core value, and I'll talk a little bit about values, because in the world in which we operate and work and we live today, I wish I could say that everything is about facts and figures. The League has a great reputation for fact sheets, for getting the arguments right based on the facts, carefully researched, carefully presented. We live in a world today, as you've seen, where information is communicated not in fact sheets, but in 140 characters. It recently got raised to 280 characters on Twitter. You can't do a fact sheet. You cannot tweet a fact sheet. You can tweet something engaging with a link to a fact sheet, but today's mode of communication, and our president has extraordinarily used it well, is based on very rapid fire, short, not detailed facts and figures, fact sheets. And it goes to values. I'm a public interest attorney. I write legal briefs. We hope they're carefully reasoned, they're well put together, they marshal the case law, they apply the law to the facts, they explain the facts, and along with my colleagues, we have a pretty good track record in terms of persuading courts and administrative agencies to do what we are advocating for. We don't win them all, nobody wins them all, but I'll stand on our record as being damn good. But that's different than what it comes to engage people. You don't want to have me read my legal brief to you tonight. It would be scintillating, really. You don't want to hear me rattle off lots of facts and figures that by the time I get to the fourth one, it's just all washing over. And what we're seeing in terms of American politics, which is driving policy, which is the reason why you asked me to talk tonight, is a president, and I'm going to give you one number, 78,000. President Trump won his election by a total of 78,000 voters in 3 Great Lakes states, okay? Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That was the difference in terms of our national policy. He won his election in the Great Lakes states, and yes, I know you're from around the country, but hey, you're in Chicago. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Great Lakes in an overall context. President Trump won his election in the Great Lakes, and what he's done has amounted to a policy and a budget war on the Great Lakes, okay? That's a little provocative, but I'm going to back up what I'm saying here. So Judy Beck used to work at EPA Region 5 office that has the Great Lakes National Program Office there. In other words, the work to protect the Great Lakes is done in Chicago in an office of talented, serious people who are based on the Great Lakes. One of the proposals of the administration was to close down the Chicago office and transfer the Great Lakes responsibilities to Region 7, from Region 5 to Region 7, okay? Point being, the numbers here don't matter to you, right? A few of you may know Region 5 or Region 7, but most of you would not. But you do know this. Region 7 is headquartered in Lenexa, Kansas, okay? Lenexa, Kansas, anybody from Kansas here? Okay, it's a outer ring suburb of Kansas City. Overland Park is sort of the big suburb, and then you get to Lenexa. So think about this for a minute. If, for example, BP had another oil spill on Lake Michigan, and EPA was to send the emergency response team, would they get quicker there from Chicago or Lenexa, Kansas? Okay. This proposal was so apparently foolish that it sunk on its own weight, finally. But the fact is, we never should have had to fight that battle. Second, on the Great Lakes, I said war on the Great Lakes, I'll give you 4. Number 2, President zeroed out the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, something that the League did a lot of work on behalf of, a program that has spent $2.5 billion throughout the 8 Great Lakes states, remarkably effective, viewed widely as successful, and doing things that nobody finds to be terribly controversial. Restoring shorelines and wetlands, protecting some recreational areas. In other words, getting invasive species out of the lake or keeping them from getting in. This is a program that's been very popular over time. It's worked well. There is no constituency of people out there saying, zero out the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The President has done so twice in the EPA budget of EPA Administrator Pruitt. And twice, here's what's happened. People organized. They worked together. There were op-eds and letters to the editor in the newspapers. People contacted their friends and neighbors. People wrote letters. People talked to their congresspeople. Representative David Joyce, a Republican from Ohio, and Representative Marcy Kaptur, a Democrat, helped lead the charge in the House to get the money restored. Senator Rob Portman in the Senate, Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan, a Republican and a Democrat, both Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth in Illinois. Swear to this. Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin wrote a letter saying, President, restore the money. Governor Rick Snyder of Michigan, a Republican, wrote a letter saying, restore the money. Governor Mark Dayton of Minnesota, a Democrat, restore the money. Twice now, Congress has rejected the budget cut, which zeroed it out, and restored $300 million in each of the budget cycles. Big victory, not a fight that we should have had to fight, but people played to win, and we won. Third, anybody from Michigan here? Anybody want to say the name of the one national marine sanctuary on fresh water in the Great Lakes? Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary runs along Lake Huron in northeast Michigan. It goes from Alpena up to the Mackinac Bridge. There's a really neat little visitor center in Alpena. School kids visit it. In Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, it's sometimes called Shipwreck Alley. There are 100 boats that sunk there. Apparently the waters are very turbulent, and over time, lots of boats have sunk, and it's sort of an underwater museum of shipwrecks. I've been up there, it's neat. You can take a boat and you can see these shipwrecks. It's really cool. And the visitor center is sort of a museum of maritime history in the Great Lakes. It's a neat place. This is not Yosemite. This is not Yellowstone. This is a really neat place. Only freshwater national marine sanctuary. During the Obama administration, it was increased in size by about 90%, and it had widespread support. Governor Snyder of Michigan, a Republican, went scuba diving there to announce that he was supporting it. You can't make that up. He did. It was pretty cool. The delegation, both sides. It's a good tourist attraction. It brings people in. The U.S. Department of Commerce, under Secretary of Ross, announced that they were reviewing Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary to cut it down by 90% and open it up to oil and gas drilling. I'm just telling you as it is. War on the Great Lakes. A couple things happened. First of all, the Michigan congressional delegation, both sides of the aisle, wrote a letter to the Secretary of Commerce saying, first of all, we all like Thunder Bay. Everybody wants it to continue. It's created jobs. It's been good for the economy. It's a source of pride. We all like it, and the public likes it. And by the way, there's a federal law that's a permanent ban on oil drilling in the Great Lakes. Just saying. When he was 16-year-old son used to go, just saying. Governor Snyder pointed out that in the Michigan part of the waters, there's a statutory ban on oil and gas drilling. What's he thinking when they do this? But in terms of what do you do then to counter that? Well, first people wrote to the Michigan congressional delegation, and those legislators, both sides of the aisle again, bipartisan but really nonpartisan, wrote to Secretary Ross and said, don't do this. And then under the National Marine Sanctuaries Act, there's a particular provision, if you're a lawyer and you really dig into it, by which the governor of a state where there's a national marine sanctuary has to approve the creation of a marine sanctuary. It's sort of a states' rights provision, but also has to approve any change to one. So we turned to Governor Snyder, and Governor Snyder wrote a very nice letter that we worked with the staff on, and they took some of what we suggested, and then they wrote their own letter. It's very good, and it says basically, we don't want to embarrass you by vetoing your changing it. So how about if you don't do that? And everybody is just going to be really happy. I mean, it's a little more legal than that, but the bottom line message from the governor was, if I have to veto your changing it, I'll do it, but let's all be smart here and take an idea that was a misguided idea and get rid of it. But that's what we're dealing with on a day-to-day, regular basis. We're dealing with the US EPA. Anybody here from Toledo? Okay, around there? Harmful algae blooms, toxic blue-green algae? Okay, so the US EPA approves Michigan's determination that Western Lake Erie is contaminated by toxic blue-green algae. Then the US EPA, same EPA, both under Pruitt, approves Ohio's finding that it's not contaminated by toxic blue-green algae, okay? So just think through the logic of this for a minute. The glass of water on your table cannot be half contaminated and not contaminated. The same body of water cannot be impaired by pollution or not impaired by pollution any more than that glass of water can be half and half. We filed a lawsuit on behalf of the Environmental Law and Policy Center and an environmental group in Toledo, federal district court judge in Toledo, a gentleman who's been on the bench for 30 years, wrote a 25-page opinion in which he accuses the US EPA of engaging on the edge of bad faith. I believe his phrase was a whiff of bad faith. Reverses the decision and basically slams the EPA under Pruitt and the Ohio EPA and says, this needs to get cleaned up. 4 summers ago, 500,000 people in the Toledo area were without safe drinking water because of the toxic blue-green algae. I mean, this is real. For 72 hours, fresh water was trucked in by the National Guard. So again, we have a federal court judge who steps up and says, that's it. You need to do something about this, right? So I gave you 4 examples. None of those are battles that we should have had to fight. First one, moving the Great Lakes office, that's an administrative action. The second one, cutting the Great Lakes restoration budget to 0, that's a budget. That's a legislative action, and that's the pushback on the legislative side. The third one, in terms of Thunder Bay, that's something being done by the executive branch, by the administrative agency, and a governor is pushing back and the delegation to say, you can't do this. And the fourth one involves a lawsuit that we brought and a federal district court judge. The point of that is there's not a magic bullet. We don't win by just filing lawsuits or just reaching out to people and saying, please talk to your congresspeople, or just asking people to reach out to their governor, or just hoping that the congressional members will step up, or getting good editorials and op-eds that lead a bad idea like moving the Great Lakes office from Chicago to Lenexa, Kansas to sort of die of its own bad weight. We need to be doing a lot of things creatively together in order to play to win. And we need to do that. I said, I'm not going to give you lots of facts and figures. We need to do that around values. Okay? A little bit about just values here. In February, after President Trump was elected, we hired Ann Selzer. Ann is called by 538 to be the best dam pollster in America. Ann is absolutely terrific. She's in Des Moines, Iowa. She does polling for USA Today, for Bloomberg, and for the Des Moines Register. Ann did 12 focus groups for us of Trump voters in swing areas of swing states. Grand Rapids, Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Have any of you ever watched a focus group? Isn't it interesting, for those of you? I mean, you sit there behind sort of a one-way window. The focus group moderator, in this case Ann Selzer, is in the room with whoever the people are who are there to participate. People are paid like $75 to share their views. They're told that there are people watching. It's not hide the ball. If you all have seen any detective show on TV where somebody's being interrogated and they're all watching, that's sort of what it is, except the room has a little more air, and you're drinking, there's a bottle of wine and a couple sodas and beers and sandwiches and cookies, and it's a little bit more enjoyable. And you watch and you learn, and somebody like Ann, who's incredibly good, draws people out. So here's what we learned about, these are people who voted for President Trump in November of 18, and we were trying to get an understanding of how do they think about environmental issues. When it came to protecting the Great Lakes, when it came to protecting safe, clean water, I don't think if you had watched and listened to these people and read Ann's report, and we'll be glad to share it with you, that you would have thought these folks were Trump voters versus Clinton voters. They really, when it came to this set of issues, were great. Should there be regulation on, reducing pollution into waterways? Well, absolutely. I live downstream. I need to make sure that my water is clean. Well, aren't you a little edgy about regulation? No, that's common sense. It's water. That's the water I drink. That's the water my kids drink. I mean, the conversation, there would have been a very different conversation, I expect, had it been about immigration or so many of the other issues today that are hot button issues. When it came to water, we looked at it and we said, this is part of a vast majority of Americans. When it comes to water, think differently. Okay, so here's some of the values that come out. And we teased out of folks, well, why do you care so much about water? Set aside another number. 42 million people in 8 states and 2 Canadian provinces get their drinking water from the Great Lakes. Okay, I mean, in Chicago, all of it comes from here. And for those of you who may be from around Chesapeake Bay or Colorado or from the Pacific Northwest, you can sort of figure out the own similar equation of where people get water. So value number one. And I'll talk about the Great Lakes, but for those of you who aren't from here, just sort of think about how it applies to where you are. The Great Lakes is where we live, where we work, and where we play. You scratch a little for people who live in Michigan, Chicago, Toledo, Fort Wayne. It's why is lakefront property worth so much? It's because everybody likes to be by the lake. If you go in Chicago, you're seeing a bunch of lakefront high-rises. If you went 4 blocks in, they're worth half as much. It's where we go to the beach. It's where we love to look. It's where we live, where we work, where we play. It's where people fish, camp, canoe, hike, swim. When we go to recreate, lots of us, we go out on boats, we go out on canoes, whether it's the Great Lakes or rivers, it's where we fish, it's where we swim on a beach. It's what we do for the outdoors that's inexpensive, easy, accessible, it's fun. It's how we enjoy life. And third, it's where we get the water we drink for so many of us. So when it comes to where we live, where we work, where we play, our sense of place, when it comes to where we go to play and have fun, when it comes to how do we just get the basics, water that we can drink that's safe and clean, those are values that transcend lots of facts and figures, and they transcend any meaningful political divide. So what I've said is, This one ought to be winnable. We have a president who is undermining 50 years of a clean water regulatory system that's designed to protect our rivers, our lakes, our streams, to make them, in the words of the Clean Water Act, fishable and swimmable. And we've achieved a lot of progress. Anybody who's grown up in the Chicago area remembers when Lake Michigan was a mess. When raw sewage was being dumped in the lake, when swimming in the lake, which I did as a kid, you see lots of stuff floating around. When alewives covered the beaches, the Clean Water Act has worked. Okay? Does it need to work better? Yes, but there isn't a great body of public view or literature that says this has failed, get rid of it. But that's what we have a president doing. And the league's worked on this for years, and that's what you talked about earlier today. But over the last 50 years, Clean Water Act was passed in 1970. So almost 50 years, 48. We have a system that has worked pretty well. I'm a public interest lawyer. I can give you some examples of where it's not working well. We don't think it's perfect, but you do not have a movement in this country of people saying, get rid of the Clean Water Act. Okay? You just don't see that billboard anywhere. You don't have candidates running on that platform. What do you stand for? I want to get rid of the Clean Water Act. I mean, that just doesn't, that's not what we have. So here's the sorts of things that we need to do. First of all, we're coming into an election cycle, and I feel almost silly saying this given all the League of Women Voters has done for years and years. Get people out to vote, okay? Friends, neighbors, if people are concerned about clean water, they need to say to whether it's the state representative, state senator, congressperson, senator, governor, president, what are you doing to protect and restore safe, clean drinking water? And if you don't like the answer, or if the league in a nonpartisan scorecard says that candidate X has voted 10 out of 10 times to undermine safe, clean drinking water, get that information out to people, and the information is only as good as it's being used. We all know the demographics of people who vote in this country. It's disproportionately people over 50. Let's make sure that people over 50 who care a lot about safe, clean drinking water get out and vote. And I'm not saying people should be single-issue voters, but that ought to be something that they care about and ask candidates. And that's the second piece. Candidates and legislators, they come to present to you. You go to meetings. Ask them. A quick little story, just because it's sort of fun and it reflects that. Lauren and I and our 3 kids live part-time in rural Wisconsin, about 1.5 miles from the Wisconsin River. Some of you know we're near a town called Spring Green. It's about 40 miles west of Madison. The local 4th of July parade is always in Lone Rock. It's a little town about 8-10 miles from Spring Green, and for whatever historic reason, all the local communities consolidate. These are all small towns. They consolidate to do the parade in Lone Rock. And all the local politicians march in the parade, and they walk up and down and shake hands and so forth. There's a wonderful group that works to protect the lower Wisconsin River. And there's something called the Lower Wisconsin River Council or Association. And their job is to protect the lower Wisconsin River and keep it clean and so forth. It's a nice thing to do. So the state senator, who's been in there for a long time until recently, is always in the parade. And there we are, the 5 of us. So I'm sort of here, and Lauren goes up about 25 yards, and we send the kids up about another 50 yards. And it's like, Dale, Senator Schultz, Thank you for your support on protecting the Wisconsin River. Really good. We appreciate it. You know, Lauren says whatever she says. The kids go, hey, Senator, you're protecting the river. That's great. We have a couple other friends who engage in this. So, you know, I sort of figure when he goes back and he sort of asks, well, you know, what am I hearing about when I go on the parade? You know, I always hear from all these folks about protecting the river. You know, if they don't hear it, you know, it's the old tree falls in the forest, there's nobody there. So when you're at meetings with legislators, whether they're state or federal, and if you care deeply about water, ask them. They need to hear from you. And they need to hear from you not just in a letter that is opened up by a 22-year-old intern who sends you a form letter, but they need to hear from you when you're there. Ask them a question. You know, my colloquy with state senator in Wisconsin is not a long, detailed thing. It's, hey, Dale, thanks for your support on the Wisconsin River. It's really great. Shakes my hands like, okay, there's that guy on the Wisconsin River. You know, and I have on a T-shirt and shorts. I'm not wearing my suit. Make sure you talk to legislators and communicate with them. And two places it's made a huge difference recently. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, $300 million of funding. And by the way, there's a fund like that for the Chesapeake Bay and one for the Everglades. The same mostly good stuff has happened to those funds being restored from the same type of action going forward. And it's because our congressional delegation heard from lots of people a lot of times, and they said to the administration, sorry, we're putting that money back in. Same thing is happening on the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is used around the country, but particularly out west. It's really important. It's used for projects to conserve land and water. And there's a really strong bipartisan group of congresspeople who are putting the funding back into that, okay? They're hearing from people. Third, we sometimes think about everything's the federal government. Well, while the federal government is stepping back, state and local governments need to step up. And there's a lot of good things that are beginning to happen in the cities, in the states, and I wish it could happen with much more federal support. But if it doesn't, you know, when I was a kid, I used to hear the line, you know, one door closes, another door opens, you know, when you didn't get something you wanted. Well, if we're not getting what we want out of the federal government, let's make sure we're knocking on the doors of the state and local governments to step up and act and do what needs to be done. We're dealing with waterways that for the most part are in states, are in communities. When it comes, say, to the Chicago River, we really need the city of Chicago, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, and other local officials to act to protect it. And that's true all over the country. Don't let the state and local officials, if you will, get off the hook by saying, look what they're doing in Washington. Say, this is an opportunity for you to step up, and we will work with you to do what we wish the federal government was doing. They're not. So this is a responsibility of people here locally. We can do it. We can get things done. Fourth, citizen science. Judy and I were talking a little bit about what you heard a presentation earlier on the Internet of Water, which is, I didn't know about it. It was really interesting to hear. Here's something we're doing on air quality. For many years, Chicago has the first or second worst asthma rate in the country. Part of it is caused by diesel pollution that comes from trucks and trains. Some large industrial facilities create small particles. They get in people's respiratory systems. They cause respiratory problems, and they help cause asthma. The best way of identifying particulate levels in a community is a monitor that's about the size of a boxcar. The US EPA has them. It has, I think it's about 12.5 in the Chicago area. They're accurate, they're big, they're expensive, and they're not very mobile. Okay? They do a very good job. but there aren't that many of them. The Environmental Law and Policy Center has purchased 44 handheld monitors. They are the size of about 2 cell phones put together. They are not as accurate as the EPA monitors. Call them, they're pretty darn good. And they are very mobile. They're inexpensive. We're the largest owner of these in the country, and we are working with community partners to do the following. The Blackstone Bike Co-op kids strapped them to their bicycles or their backpacks, and it gives continuous particulate monitoring data, which Bluetooth connects to a cell phone, goes up to a dashboard, and we have some folks who take that information, or they take the data, and they translate that into maps and information that people can use. It's absolutely remarkable. We have 1.5 million data points in Chicago from last summer. We're doubling it this summer, and we're beginning to expand to work in Cleveland. This is a powerful tool. First of all, it's not all that expensive. Secondly, it's easy to do. Third, it engages people. Fourth, instead of my pet phrase, desperately seeking data, you can take data and you can translate it into maps and information that people really do get and understand. We've open sourced it all. And people can then see hot spots in their communities and can figure out what to do about it. So there was one area where there were very high particulate levels, and there was some health data of high asthma rates. So I'll give you 2 places where this happened. One, we wound up asking, there's an arterial with a lot of trucks. We asked, are the traffic lights synchronized while all the trucks are idling and putting out stuff? The answer we got back, no. Good point. Synchronize the traffic lights. There was a bus terminal nearby. I don't know if you know, city buses are not supposed to idle. Well, you can ask city bus drivers, how about if you really don't idle? Because this is a hot spot. Another place, we couldn't figure out why in the heck the particulate levels were so high. Turns out, we finally walked up and down the block. There was a barbecue joint. The guy had a big barbecue grill and pit and didn't have a hood on it. And a number of our community group partners went over there and basically said, Fred, we love you, your food's great, you're great in the community. Will you put a hood on the thing and capture some of the stuff that's all going up in the air? I mean, this is solvable if people have information. So again, when the federal government steps back, we need to take advantage of new innovative technology and get that in people's hands and communities to test and monitor, translate that information, and help people solve things at a local level. Fifth and finally, litigate. I'm a litigator by training. I've been a litigator for 30 some odd years. I'm good at it. Actually, really pretty good at it. The first step isn't to file a lawsuit, but we're damn well going to file a lawsuit if we need to file a lawsuit. And sometimes, as in the case of the toxic blue-green algae in Western Lake Erie, that is necessary. And if we're going to do it, you heard me say before, we play to win. The Toledo Blade, by the way, has been absolutely terrific in terms of editorial support. We couldn't write it better ourselves. And we talk with their reporters a lot. If you want to win in the court of law, you need to win in the court of public opinion. The mayor these days is very supportive about taking action, and that helps make a difference as well. I know the League of Women Voters isn't going to file a lot of lawsuits, but maybe there's a place or two where you should be. I mean, if you have a choice between, as an attorney, you know, the Greenpeace of Cleveland versus US EPA, or the League of Women Voters of Ohio versus EPA, I'll go with the League of Women Voters. I think in the appropriate cases, And I'm not suggesting you become litigious, but there are places where it's appropriate for civic organizations like yours, where you care deeply about issues. And I know you've done this on, if you will, the voting side, but on safe, clean drinking water, when we're facing the threats we are today, this is a place for you to intervene in the courts. That's not an option you should give up. All right, so that's the whole toolkit. Inform people and get them to vote. When the federal government isn't acting, work the state and local side. Make sure your legislators hear from you. Not just postcards, but when you're at a meeting with people or at a forum, ask them questions about water. My word, they're hearing about everything else. Make sure they hear about how much you care about safe, clean drinking water, and do it with things that resonate both with the legislators and with the people in the room as reflecting core values, not the endless numbers and facts and figures that we've all been in meetings where people use and eyes begin to glaze over. Citizen science is a new, emerging, powerful opportunity to use innovative technology and work with people in communities to really make a difference on clean water and clean air. More to come on that. This is a place where the League, which has prided itself on citizen participation and civic participation, can really be a leader. And the last is, don't be afraid to litigate in the right case. We play to win. That's the whole toolkit. Talk to people. It's all frustrating right now. Stay engaged. Don't give up democracy. Play to win. We'll get it done. Thank you. Judy, do you want me to take questions or? Okay. Fire away if you got a couple questions. Yes, ma'am, then over back, okay?
So with regards to litigate, do you think that something like line 5 might be an appropriate case for the league to take on? Because it's nonpartisan and involves water.
I can tell you that we are engaged in conversations right now on a lawsuit on line 5, and if the League of Women Voters in Michigan or nationally would like to be involved, we would be glad to talk with you about representing you and engaging you on it. Yes, ma'am. Is that direct enough? I agree. Economics matters, and particularly in the North. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a year, and I worked pretty closely with a group called the Headwaters Group that did exactly the sort of economics analysis you're talking about. Those numbers used well in the right places. I'm with you. Yes, ma'am.
The handheld monitors that you talked about,
Yep.
does one exist for monitoring ozone?
The ozone monitors are not, the small monitors I'm talking about at present don't do ozone, and I think in the next year, year and a half, we'll do that in terms of ground level ozone. Not atmospheric ozone, but ground level ozone. And if that's something you want to dig into some, shoot me an email at the office and I'll connect you with our staff that's working on that. By the way, one of our senior law fellows, some of you may know, Janet McCabe. Janet was the associate administrator, or was the administrator in terms of air quality in the Obama administration for 4 years. She was Gina McCarthy's chief deputy. when Gina was head of air quality, and then when Gina became the EPA administrator, Janet became the head of air quality. Janet is really excited about this, as our team at the office, because it provides a whole new way of being able to get what I'll call not top quality, you know, the sort of data that an EPA air quality monitor does, but what I'll call pretty good to good data, that's very good indicator data of, hey, we got a problem here, let's do something about it. Yes, ma'am?
What's the cost of the portable air monitors?
$250 each. Compared to Judy, EPA monitors are about $20,000 or so. Yeah, I mean, that's the rough comparison.
So the monitors they're mostly particulates that they're.
These are for particulates, yeah. They are literally the size of about 2.5 of my not terribly remarkable cell phone. And they're $250, and I think the price is going to come down some because we're not buying one or two, we're buying a bunch. But what that means is they're affordable, they can be used, and we are training people in communities around Chicago and now in Cleveland of how to use them. And it's everybody, you know, across the spectrum of neighborhood groups, kids, et cetera, to get the data. Yes? Hey, Henrietta.
Hello. Could you talk for a minute about why the court of opinion, public opinion is important for law?
Yep.
And also, give us some perspective, hopefully something positive about the court system with appointments and
I am one of faith, okay? First of all, you read about and hear about some very ideological judges. That makes good copy, and certainly President Trump is appointing people who are disproportionately ideological compared to either, say, the Bush administration or Clinton or Obama or before then. On the court of public opinion, and I'll start there, judges read the newspaper, okay? Judges are people. I can't go to a judge while I'm litigating a case and say, hey, judge, let me have a ex parte off-the-record conversation. But judges are not set up as, you know, monks in, you know, hermetically sealed monasteries. They hear about stuff, they read stuff. So, for example, I don't know whether Judge Carr in Toledo, who's ruled favorably for us, reads the Toledo Blade or not. I have no idea. I have no idea where he gets his news and information, and I'm sure he's probably not reading all the newspapers and Googling, you know, Toledo toxic algae bloom. But if you live in, anybody live in Toledo? I mean, this is right, it's front page news. You know, twice a week, the paper's editorializing, it's on the newspaper, Toledo Blade is the paper of record. It's on the radio. I mean, it's an issue that people are talking about. If you like to fish for walleye, you're concerned about it. I mean, this is just a big deal issue. It's as if the Lake Michigan beaches on the north and south side of Chicago were closed down for 2/3 of the summer. People be talking about it because we all love the beach and we all go there. So if you want to win in the court of law, it sure as heck helps to be winning in the court of public opinion, okay? Judges hear the news, read the newspapers. I mean, most of them, or many of them, are not extremely ideological. All of them have taken an oath in terms of being fair. And I just don't believe that judges who, you know, have experienced blue-green algae in the lake don't somehow have that in their mind that this might be something that, properly following the law, somebody ought to do something about. Okay? So that's one. On your question of do I have faith in the courts, Man, it's getting tough. But again, on the, one door closes, another door opens. There are state courts as well as federal courts. The Illinois state courts years ago, shall we say, there were a lot of ethical problems that were highlighted by investigation after investigation. The state court system's getting better here. It's getting better in a lot of places. Frankly, there are a lot of talented people who look at it and say, you know what? Being a judge would be a pretty good job, and I think we're seeing more talented people go on to the bench. In the federal courts, it's a mixed bag. I mean, it really is. You have, I'll use the Northern District of Illinois, but you could say the same for the Northern District of California or the Eastern District of Michigan or the Western District of Michigan. You have different judges who've been appointed by different people at different times. Some of them are really bright bulbs, some of them are okay, and some of them are, shall we say, not the brightest bulbs. Some of them are sharp, some of them maybe used to be sharper than they are today, and that doesn't have always everything to do with who appointed them. It has to do with their people, okay? I can tell you there's certain judges, and you get assigned a judge in the Northern District of Illinois, same thing in the Western District of Michigan or the Northern District of Ohio. When you file a case, you get a random assignment of who your district court judge is. And sometimes you look at that and you say, oh good, she'll be pretty good here. She'll be fair, she'll be smart. And sometimes you look at it and you say, oh, in front of her or him, this is going to be interesting. So most cases are decided at the district court level. We read about the Supreme Court's 5-4 decisions, and those certainly affect what the district court judges do because they're controlling precedent. But there's a whole lot that gets decided by the district court judges. Ditto on the courts of appeals. Again, you can get a very different, court of appeals might have 12 judges, but they hear cases in 3-judge panels for the most part. And you can get very different panels that bring different stuff to the table. So I'm an optimist, okay? There's no such thing of being an excellent public interest attorney and being a pessimist. I mean, it's just not, that equation doesn't work. I want to be a public interest lawyer and I want to give up, earning more money at a law firm, but I'm really pessimistic I'll be able to get anything done. I mean, my colleagues tend to be people like me who are optimistic about trying to find creative ways to change things. What it means, Henrietta, in short, is you gotta be more creative and you gotta be more savvy in the current court system in light of some of the more recent appointments. You can play to win, you just gotta be a little more creative. And in some cases, less likely to win, and yes, I am way disappointed in some of the recent rulings by the court. I'm not Pollyanna about this. Thank you very much. Go ahead, ma'am. I'll do one more, and then Judy's coming up, and I thank you for letting me spend some time with you. Yes, ma'am.
I wonder if you, in a different type of venue that could have control, thinking of the Great Lakes Basin Compact, and some of the recent news we're hearing out of Wisconsin, what the city of Racine has granted in terms of Foxcom and a possible diversion of water away from the basin, but also the public-private issue, violating the compact. What I've said is about all I know about it.
I could.
Perspective, and can you help us on that?
Yeah, simply put, I could teach 2 sessions of my law school class on it, but the whole purpose of the Great Lakes Compact is to keep water that's in the Great Lakes Basin in the basin. Wisconsin got the first exception. They were allowed to move a little bit of water outside the line near Waukesha, Wisconsin. Foxcom, Governor Walker is going through a lot of twists and turns to argue that they're not really taking water outside the basin. That's going to be challenged in court, and whether ultimately they've structured in a way that's permissible or not, the whole spirit is to keep the water in the Great Lakes. And I think when post-November, there's going to be a lot of changeover in the Great Lakes governors. And I'm not talking about who's going to win which place, or Republican or Democrat, just that You know, Governor Snyder's stepping down, Governor Dayton's stepping down, Governor Kasich is stepping down. There's some other races that are pretty competitive. I think you're going to see the governors come together and say, all right here, you know, we're either going to have a compact, in which case we're all going to agree to implement it and enforce it with the spirit of the law, not just what ways can we find to sort of get around it. So I think that's where it's going in the longer run. Okay? Thank you for letting me join you.
So I want you to know that you heard it here first. When Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. And Howard is telling us when we have problems, so when they go high, we go local, right? Okay, you heard it here.